There is a statistic that genuinely made me stop in my tracks today, and I want you to just let this sink in for a second. If you start a business today, there's like a 70% chance you will be completely out of business in 10 years.
Right. Which is just staggering.
Yeah, it's brutal. And if you miraculously survive that decade and you decide you finally, want to sell your company, 8 out of 10 businesses listed for sale will not sell at all.
It's a sobering reality. It really is. I mean, you pour your life, your sweat, your capital into this entity, and the overwhelming statistical probability is that you either close the doors or you just walk away with nothing to show for it. It
Exactly.
really forces you to ask, well, what are the successful 20% doing differently?
And that is exactly the core question we're tackling today in this deep dive into the book Exit Rich by Michelle Seiler Tucker and Sharon Lechter. The mission here is to really unpack their blueprint for building something, whether that's a massive corporation, a small boutique, or honestly, any long-term project you're working on that is sustainable, scalable, and highly saleable.
Hmm.
There's actually a great quote from Elon Musk in the text that sets the tone perfectly. He says, if you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion.
Which means you can't just, throw flour and sugar into an oven and hope for the
All
best.
right, you'll just get a mess.
Exactly. And I want to highlight early on that even if you, the person listening to this right now, even if you aren't a CEO planning a multi-million-dollar corporate buyout,
Mm.
the strategic endgame thinking here is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
The goal-setting frameworks we're going to explore today, they are entirely adaptable. They apply to your career trajectory, your personal ventures, really any scenario where you are trying to build undeniable value over time.
So let's start with the root of the problem. If someone actually manages to build a profitable company over a decade, shouldn't buyers just be lining up around the block? Like, why are 8 out of 10 unsaleable?
Well, the authors point to this massive operational blind spot. Basically, business owners get totally trapped in the weeds.
What do you mean by the weeds?
They fall victim to what you might call the founder's hero syndrome.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so they're so busy working in the business, right?
Hmm.
Answering the phones, putting out daily fires, micromanaging the inventory.
Doing everything themselves.
Precisely. They do that so much that they never step back to work on the business. Because they believe they're the only ones who can do the job right, they essentially become the single point of failure.
So if the founder leaves or gets sick, the value of the business basically drops to zero because the entire operation was just living inside their head.
You're hitting on the exact operational trap. If a business cannot run without you, you don't actually own a business.
Wow.
You own a highly demanding job.
Wow. Yeah.
And buyers, they don't want to buy your job.
Right. Nobody wants to buy a 60-hour work week, which this brings us to the origin story of our co-author, Michelle Seiler Tucker, because she actually saw this tragedy playing out firsthand.
She did.
She started out in corporate America working at Xerox, and she was crushing it. 6-figure income, phenomenal benefits. She was managing like 80 salespeople. On paper, it sounds like the absolute dream.
But she was miserable.
Completely miserable within months. She hated the corporate bureaucracy, all the company politics, and she had this really stark realization. I am expending all this energy just to make someone else rich.
She recognized that she had basically been promoted out of the thing she actually loved doing, which was selling and solving complex client problems.
Right.
And she was pushed into essentially babysitting a corporate sales team. So she took this massive leap and eventually started her own mergers and acquisitions firm.
And sitting at that M&A desk is where she witnessed this recurring nightmare over and over. People would dedicate their entire adult lives to building a business.
Sacrificing everything.
Yeah, sacrificing their health, time with their kids, marriages even, only to find out at the finish line that their company was structurally unsaleable.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. They'd end up closing their doors, filing for bankruptcy, and losing not just the business assets, but their family's personal assets too, because
Yeah.
they never, planned an exit strategy.
No foresight at all.
It makes me think of building a house without any blueprints. Like you just start nailing boards together, adding a room here, a roof there, and then 10 years later you realize you never built a front door for anyone else to walk through.
That is a perfect analogy. And to take that a step further, there was a recent survey of businesses in San Diego mentioned in the text. 53% of business owners aged 51 or older had given absolutely no thought to their transition.
Wait, really? Over half?
More than half.
Hmm.
These are people approaching retirement age, holding an asset that is likely their primary nest egg, and they haven't even begun to formulate an end game.
How does that even happen? Like, how do you even begin to fix that kind of systemic denial?
Well, the authors introduce a framework they call the Seiler Tucker GPS exit model. It uses a GPS metaphor, and, the very first rule of a GPS is that to get anywhere, you have to actually pipe a clear destination into the system.
Right, you can't just turn it on and start driving.
Exactly. You have to define what you want your business to sell for.
But I'm guessing most people don't type in a realistic coordinate. I'd imagine they type in a fantasy based on, like, what they wish they had.
That is the most common pitfall, hands down.
Yeah.
Sellers don't base their asking price on the actual mathematical value of their company.
What do they base it on then?
They base it on what they need. What they need to fund their retirement, or even worse, what they need to pay off their personal debts.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there is a heartbreaking case study in the book about exactly this. Tucker meets with the owners of a manufacturing company who want to sell.
I remember this one.
Yeah, they sit down and tell her, we want to sell for $5 million. So she asks how they arrived at that number. Was it based on their market share, their cash flow? No.
Not at all.
They said $5 million is what they had spent over the years on inventory, furniture, fixtures, equipment, and crucially, it was exactly the amount they needed to clear their massive business debts.
Which raises a very uncomfortable reality check. The market does not care about your debt.
Right.
Tucker's firm actually performed a valuation and looked at the real health of the business. The company was generating about $500,000 a year in EBITDA.
And for anyone unfamiliar, just to jump in, EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's essentially the raw cash-generating power of the machine before the government or the banks take their cut.
Exactly. So they're making $500,000 a year in raw cash flow. Now walk through how a buyer looks at that number.
Okay.
Why wouldn't a buyer pay $5 million for a company making $500,000? Because buyers look at acquisitions through the lens of return on investment.
Right. How fast can I get my money back?
Yep. Yes. How quickly can this business generate enough cash to pay them back for the purchase? In the manufacturing sector, the industry standard multiple for a business of this size is typically 3 to 4 times EBITDA.
Okay, so a buyer is willing to wait 3 to 4 years to recoup their investment.
Correct. That means mathematically, fundamentally, the business is worth somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million.
But the owners demanded $5 million. That is 10 times their EBITDA. They were basically asking a buyer to wait a decade just to break even.
It's completely untethered from financial reality. And because these owners refused to compromise on their fantasy number, which again was dictated entirely by their past financial mistakes and debt, they couldn't sell.
And the tragic end to that story is that they went completely bankrupt.
Bankrupt. Lost everything.
Isn't this exactly like trying to sell a beat-up used car for $50,000 just because you happen to have $50,000 in student loans?
That is exactly what it is.
The buyer is looking at the Kelley Blue Book value of the car. Your student loans are totally irrelevant to the person buying the Toyota.
That illustrates the disconnect perfectly. To avoid that fate, the GPS model insists you have to know your current starting value. You need an annual valuation checkup.
Which makes sense.
The authors point out a glaring irony in how we treat our assets. We get annual physicals from our doctors. We take our cars in for annual inspections.
Right.
Yet business owners completely ignore the financial health of their most prized asset until the exact moment they want to sell it.
And by then, if the engine is failing, it's way too late to fix it. I think there's a micro application here for anyone listening to.
Yeah.
Even if you don't own a company. If you treat your own career like a business, do you actually know your current market value?
Oh, that's a great point.
Right. Do you know what skills are commanding a premium right now, or are you just assuming your current salary is what you're worth? You have to audit yourself.
That's a really profound way to look at it. You have to know where you stand today. Now, once you have a realistic asking price and you know your starting point, the next logical question is, who is actually going to write you that check?
And this exposes a massive contradiction in business strategy. Because business owners will spend thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars meticulously identifying their ideal customer.
Oh, yeah. Buyer personas, demographic research, all of it.
Exactly. They know their buying habits, their pain points, but they spend absolutely zero time targeting their ideal buyer, the person or entity who will eventually buy the business itself.
If your ultimate goal is to sell, your most important customer is the person buying the company. You have to reverse engineer your entire operation to suit their specific buying criteria from day one.
So the text provides a matrix for what this looks like, specifically looking at private equity groups. Walk me through that. What is a private equity group and what are they actually looking for when they buy a business?
Sure, private equity groups, or PEGs, are basically investment management companies. They raise capital to buy private companies, optimize them, often merge them with other companies to create a powerhouse, and then sell them for a massive profit.
Okay.
They're looking to buy a mom-and-pop shop where the owner does everything. They typically want gross revenues between $15 and $20 million and an EBITDA of $1 to $3 million.
I imagine it's not just the financial metrics, though. Like, if a PEG is buying a company to scale it, they don't want to be doing the day-to-day work.
Exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
They require a strong management team already in place. They want a chief operating officer and a chief financial officer.
Which goes back to what we were saying earlier.
Right. Remember the founder's hero syndrome we discussed? If a PEG sees that the founder holds all the client relationships and makes every operational decision, they will walk away.
Because it's too risky.
Exactly. They need the business to run seamlessly the day after the founder hands over the keys.
I want to push back on this a little bit, though. Doesn't this feel incredibly restrictive?
How so?
Well, you're essentially telling an entrepreneur to build a custom-tailored suit from day one, but instead of fitting it to their own vision, they have to tailor their entire company's operations to fit the exact dimensions of some phantom private equity group. Isn't the whole point of entrepreneurship to build things your way?
It's a fair challenge, but think of it like flipping a house. If you are renovating a house to live in forever, sure, paint the living room neon green because you love it.
Right.
But if you are renovating a house to sell it on the market, you paint the walls neutral gray. Why? Because neutral gray is what the broadest pool of buyers with the deepest pockets are looking for. You are building for the market, not for your ego.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The neon green walls are basically the founder's quirks that actually drive down the sale price.
Exactly. And this leads to a critical concept contributed by co-author Sharon Lechter. She introduces the idea of demonstrative assets.
Demonstrative asset.
Yes. Buyers don't just buy your past revenue, they buy proof of future value. You have to build a foundation of intellectual property patents, trademarks, copyrights.
Can you break down how a patent actually changes the math for a buyer? Why does that make the company more valuable?
Let's say you have a highly profitable manufacturing process. Without a patent, a massive competitor could legally copy your process tomorrow and crush you.
Just steal it, basically.
Right. To a buyer, your future cash flow is highly risky in that scenario. But if you have an ironclad patent, you have created a legal moat. The buyer knows that cash flow is protected.
Ah, I see.
Low risk mathematically increases the multiple they are willing to pay for your business. It's the same with long-term client contracts. If your revenue relies on a handshake, it's pretty much worthless to a buyer.
Because the client could just walk away the next day.
Exactly. But if it's locked into a transferable 5-year contract, it's a demonstrative asset.
So if you know a PEG wants a CFO, a $3 million EBITDA, and registered patents, you don't wait until year 9 to scramble and put those things in place. You build the infrastructure for them in year 1.
Precisely. And knowing the scope of that infrastructure naturally dictates your timeline, which is the next phase of the Seiler Tucker GPS model.
Timelines seem highly individual, though. I mean, a young founder might set a 20-year horizon to build generational wealth.
True.
But if you're in an industry that is rapidly being eaten by new software, your timeline might be 12 to 24 months before your business model becomes totally obsolete. You have to be deeply realistic about the clock.
You really do.
But even with a timeline, how do you sustain the energy to actually execute all of this?
This is where we get into the psychological engine of the entire process. Setting a goal to sell a business for $20 million is easy to say. Achieving it is brutally difficult.
Oh, yeah.
To explain why people fail, the authors categorize goal setting into A-type, B-type, and C-type goals.
Let's explore those, because this framework seems universally applicable.
A-type goals are the easy ones. There is no real growth required because you've essentially already achieved something similar.
Like what?
The book uses the example of buying a car. If you currently drive a nice SUV and your goal is to buy a slightly newer model next year, that's an A-type goal.
Right.
You already know how to buy a car. You know you can afford the payment. There's no psychological hurdle.
And B-type goals.
These require a bit more stretch, but they are still well within your known capabilities.
Hmm.
Say you live in a 4,000 square foot house and you want to upgrade to a 6,000 square foot house in a gated community.
Okay.
It takes some planning, maybe securing a larger mortgage, but it doesn't force a fundamental transformation of who you are or how you operate.
But then we get to C-type goals. And these are the terrifying ones. The world-changing goals where when you set them, you have absolutely no idea how you're going to pull them off. Selling a company for $20 million is a C-type goal.
The authors argue that if your C-type goal doesn't scare you, you aren't reaching high enough. C-type goals are guaranteed to be full of massive roadblocks, unpredictable potholes, and crushing failures along the way.
Wait, if a goal guarantees failure and roadblocks, isn't that just a recipe for burning out the founder before they even get to the finish line? Like, how is guaranteed failure good advice?
Because growth only happens under tension. If you already know all the answers and have all the skills required to hit a goal, you aren't growing, you're just repeating yourself.
That makes sense.
The roadblocks in a C-type goal are what force you to become the version of yourself capable of managing a $20 million company. But you are right about the burnout risk, which is exactly why a C-type goal requires a massive, unshakable WHY.
Right. If your reason for building that company is just, I want a nicer boat, the very first time the market crashes or your lead supplier goes bankrupt, you're going to quit.
Instantly.
The pain won't be worth the boat. Your WHY has to be bulletproof.
And it must remain insulated from your own emotions. Sharon Lechter has a brilliant saying in the text, high emotion means low intelligence.
I love that.
Selling your life's work is an incredibly emotional journey. You will inherently believe your business is worth more than the market says it is because of your sweat equity.
Because you built it from scratch.
Right. That ego, that pride, that stress, it creates immense pressure.
Which causes owners to either demand a ridiculous price, like our $5 million manufacturing friends who went bankrupt, or conversely, they get so fatigued and anxious by the due diligence process that they settle for pennies on the dollar just to escape the stress.
This is why having an unemotional mentor, advisor, or M&A broker is non-negotiable.
They're a buffer.
Exactly. They serve as a rational sounding board.
Oh, yeah.
They look at the math without the emotional baggage. They prevent you from self-sabotaging the deal when the negotiations get really tense.
There is a psychological detail mentioned in the text about the selling process that I found absolutely captivating.
Oh, the epiphany.
Yes. The authors note that when a seller finally commits to the exit process, usually about 3 to 6 months in, they have this middle-of-the-night epiphany, like a bolt of lightning. Why does it happen at that specific 3 to 6 month mark?
Think about the mechanics of selling a business. For the first time in perhaps 20 years, the owner is forced to delegate the daily fires so they can actually focus on gathering documents, doing audits, and meeting with brokers.
Right.
Physically detaching from the daily operations creates mental empty space, and nature abhors a vacuum.
Oh, I see.
So once the crushing weight of payroll and inventory is lifted, their brain finally have the bandwidth to dream.
They shift from playing defense to playing offense with their life. The idea has always been there, buried in the subconscious, but engaging in the exit process lifts the fog. Suddenly, at 3 a.m., they wake up and realize, I want to start a foundation, or I want to move to Tuscany and paint. It brings us full circle to the core philosophy of the book. Establishing the end game isn't just about maximizing a bank account balance. It's fundamentally about securing your personal freedom.
That is the ultimate destination you are typing into the GPS.
Mm-hmm.
The Seiler Tucker framework is simply designed to navigate you through the chaos of business operations toward that freedom without, driving into a ditch along the way.
So let's recap the blueprint we've unpacked today. The overwhelming majority of businesses fail to sell because the owners are driving without a map.
Yeah.
To change that trajectory, you have to define a realistic destination based on real cash flow multiples, not your personal debts.
Crucial step.
You get an annual valuation checkup to know your true starting location. You painstakingly reverse engineer your operations, building that neutral gray house to target your ideal buyer's exact criteria.
No.
You lock in a realistic timeline. And you anchor the entire grueling journey with a terrifying C-type goal, fueled by a WHY. So powerful, it keeps you moving through the inevitable failures. Because working smarter from day one has far bigger payoffs than just working harder in the dark.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, kind of expanding on Sharon Lechter's concept of demonstrative assets.
Oh, this is good.
We discussed how patents, legally binding contracts, and established management processes prove a company's worth to a buyer. Now, I want you to apply that concept to yourself. Look at your own career right now.
Right.
If a major firm were to try and acquire you or hire you for your absolute dream role tomorrow, what are your personal demonstrative assets? Are you simply generating daily output, answering emails, completing assigned tasks, or are you actively building a verifiable portfolio of unique skills, deep industry networks, and documented, proven track records that no one can take away from you?
Wow. That completely changes how you look at Monday morning. Start building your personal demonstrative assets today. Make yourself undeniable to the market.
Absolutely undeniable.
Because whether you're selling a global manufacturing firm or just pitching yourself for the next big leap in your career, you don't want to be building a house without blueprints.
No, you don't.
Put your destination in the GPS, build the infrastructure to get you there, and make sure that whatever you do next, you exit rich on your own terms.